CAMPO to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Novak,
Here.
Member Erb,
Here.
Member Dodson,
Here.
Member Maloney,
Here.
Member Henderson, Member Schutte,
Here.
ex officio Member Rosenberg. I think we have a replacement.
Rebecca Capular here for Sandra Rosenberg.
Thank you. A quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item number 3, which is our beginning public comment for the CAMPO meeting. Is there any beginning CAMPO public comment? Come on up, Denny.
Well, I'm used to a flag salute and a prayer before I get up, and it didn't happen. Let's see how I
Not
do.
this meeting.
Thank you. Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Chair. I would like to say that this is an interestingly short but very long agenda, as it covers a Highway 50 review and oversight on that. I hope will be considering my concerns about the handicap accessibility to curbs and sidewalks and to bus stops, that while they can't change the ramp, the drainage areas, I think, need to be considered. Also, the transition between the sidewalk, the ramp, the gutter, and the streets depend on how high that asphalt's gotten, and certain other aspects that, if they'll take into consideration, I'd really appreciate that in their review and inspection of and considerations towards new curbing, sidewalks. Also, driveways tend to be very steep when you're in a wheelchair and with my walker. So perhaps changing what they can without messing with the ADA compliance deals, those driveways should be considered a little differently, and maybe put somebody in a chair and let them have that opportunity to feel what it's like, because some of those transitions are very hard, and I try to stay to the top side myself when I'm, but I'll rattle a bit here. I want to, this is just me, and it's not related to CAMPO, but it is. I don't want to see any more asphalts on our trails, and I was just advised during a really neat program that was put on at the senior center that VT Rail is considering asphalting every bit of old rail track areas that they can find, it sounds like. And the consideration about the heat was addressed with a question by another person, not me, that perhaps wagons would be loaned out. And I'm hoping that y'all have a thought about that and consider that possibility as being untenable for me. So as you could tell, I'm having a day, but you know what? We all have them, and thank you very much for being patient with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Denny. Do I have any other opening public comment? Come on up. Hello, Miss Dee Dee. You're on.
Hi, my name's Dee Dee Formaster. For the record, I'm with the Rural Center for Independent Living. I'm here, of course, about the sidewalks. You can just call me the sidewalk Nazi. So I still have grave concerns about the sidewalks. And I'm going to tell you why. On Monday, the construction site that is running right now over on King Street, okay, I don't know why, but for some reason, people cannot coordinate one side of the street being worked on and then the other side of the street being worked on. Instead, they work on both sides of the street at the same time, and they are getting better about only closing one side of the sidewalk. But in this case, they should have closed the other side of the sidewalk. My husband was out walking down the sidewalk, and he said he entered the work site. Now, you have to realize I bitch all the time about the sidewalks to my husband. So he took a real good look at the job site. He said there was 3 people, which was the guy who was supposed to be managing the work area, sitting around talking next to the truck. And there was a sign guy on this end and a sign guy on that end. There was a sidewalk closed sign on the right. On the left, the sidewalk was open. And there was a guy in one of those rolling machines rolling back and forth, oblivious to anything around him, going forward over the blacktop, coming back, hitting the curb, going forward over the blacktop, and he was oblivious to anything around him. Well, of course, the sidewalk wasn't blocked off, so my husband figured, well, it's not blocked, so I guess it must be safe. So he starts going down the sidewalk. Well, something told him to stop. He stopped, and a foot in front of him, the huge roller machine rolled up and over the curb into the bushes, a half a foot away from my husband. If he would have taken 2 more steps, he would have been dead. So, please, let's just coordinate things a little bit so that we work on one side of the street and then we work on the other side of the street. We don't need to work on both sides of the street at the same time. That way we can keep our sidewalks open. And everybody knows who lives on the west side, everybody walks, especially when it's hot and it's in the morning. So I just am making you aware that I think God has again tapped me on the shoulder and told me to continue being the sidewalk Nazi. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Ms. Cash.
Hello. Do I have to push a
Nope,
button?
it's green.
Melinda Cash. I'm chairman of the Mountain House Advisory Board. A lot of you probably are aware that we've been having some very large meetings and people very concerned about the heavy traffic, the fatalities, the need for something to be done in our community. I'm very sad to see Commissioner Henderson isn't here today because I was really hoping he would be here to speak on our behalf. I want to, just go on record that I am 100% in favor of slowing the speed down to 35 miles per hour in Mound House. And the main purpose is to put some type of pedestrian crossing to protect our residents. Never in my life did I imagine that we have, in a 10-day period, 340 people crossing that highway, and the average speed, 57 miles an hour. Something needs to be done. I personally believe we have uncontrolled growth to the east of Mound House. We have a highway that is not designed for the speed that, people are currently going. And so anything any of you can do to please help our little community, we're very thankful for. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cash. Do I have any other public comment? Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item number 4. This is approval of our minutes of June 12th. Does any member have any corrections or changes? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval, please.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. And any abstentions? Let the record reflect that was unanimous. Thank you. We're now going to move on to agenda item 5A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the status and potential approval of the Phase 1 of the US 50 East Carson Complete Streets Study. Again, just the Phase 1 portion of that. Ms. Norman, are you going to start us off with this presentation?
Yes, thank you. Kelly Norman, Senior Transportation Planner. So CAMPO is presenting the US 50 East Carson Complete Streets Study Phase 1 tonight. And during this plan, CAMPO received more responses than current staff have ever received for a transportation survey. This is a highly used roadway, a US bike route, and an urban freight corridor. This plan developed character zones within the length of the corridor and corridor goals, which guided the recommendations provided to the NDOT project management, which also aligns with NDOT's One Nevada plan. NDOT has confirmed that CAMPO was awarded TAP funds to fund Phase 2 of the US 50 corridor study, with an extension of the study area from I-580 in the west to State Route 341 in the east. Staff is working with NDOT on an interlocal agreement and plan to present to the CAMPO board as soon as it's ready. Staff is planning on sharing this plan, the US 50 plan, and the recently completed local road safety plan with the Lyon County Board of Commissioners, and have been communicating regularly with the Mound House Citizen Advisory Board. Finally, I'd like to introduce Jeff Hale. Jeff and the parametrics team have been responsive, reliable, and knowledgeable partners in producing the first phase of the US 50 study, and we're looking forward to working on the second phase with the parametrics team, and he will be leading the presentation today. Thank you.
Jeff.
Now to get it to presentation mode, let's see from beginning. We can do that.
I don't know. We know you have 18 slides.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Madam Mayor, members of the board. Jeff Hale, as Kelly mentioned, project manager for the US 50 East Carson Complete Street Corridor Study. Good afternoon. Brief presentation today to go over the high points of the study. The study limits extended from basically Lampa Lane east along Highway 50 to Highlands Drive in Mound House, a distance of about 4.5 miles. Working with data collection, starting the project with data collection and then public outreach, we developed a series of goals that helped inform and guide the overall corridor study. Now, the first one, obviously, safety ranks the highest, so identify improvements that enhance safety for all corridor users, both vehicle and multimodal related. Plan and deliver roadway safety traffic projects that meet the needs of local residents, commuters, and business owners. Improve multimodal connections between residential areas, their essential services that they need, and of course, recreational opportunities that span the length of the corridor. Then identify improvements that balance mobility needs with business access and economic development objectives. So safety, we obtained crash data from the department, from Nevada Department of Transportation, from April 2018 through the end of 2023. And we were able to develop this heat map to kind of give you a sense of where the most crashes are occurring. So we had a number of, we had 6 fatals in the corridor. Let's see, 5 of those were pedestrian-related. 4 of those pedestrian-related were as a result, or impairment was involved. So the majority of the accidents, crash types, were rear end and sideswipe. Obviously, rear end, lane changing type accidents also, but particularly the rear end accidents occur at the signalized intersections. So that was where the bulk of the crashes occurred. There were crashes at Empire Ranch Road and Flint Road, and then, of course, out there at Highlands Drive. We went out and got traffic counts at almost every intersection within the corridor, and then we built a synchro traffic model and did level of service analysis. And this is the results of that: level of service A being the best, and then F being the worst. So you can kind of get a sense of how the corridor is performing during the morning and afternoon peak hours. Eastbound throughs in the US 50 Airport Road are failing. US 50 at College, northbound right turn is bad. Empire Ranch and US 50 is bad northbound, so people trying to turn. I think you'll see that in the some of the data delay analysis as well. Flint and Arrowhead, Linehan also, people trying to get across US 50 during those peak hours are going to have difficulty. The eastbound through in the evening is particularly difficult. So that's a look at the level of service. Beyond that, then, we looked at the corridor demographics. There are 5 areas within the corridor, 5 census tracts. We looked at some USD data set and 2021 data, I think, from the U.S. Census Bureau. 2 of the 5 adjacent census tracts are identified in the purple and classify as disadvantaged areas. And it houses about 10,000 people. The other 3 tracts that line the corridor also have about 10,000 people. So roughly half of the population that lines the corridor lives in areas that could be considered disadvantaged. And what is disadvantaged? I guess one of the elements or aspects of that from the planning side is that they have difficulty accessing transportation for employment and services that they need. So here's a look at some employment data. I think this was 2022 data, the latest we could find. You can see that the majority of the employment is in downtown Carson City, a little bit more in the Arrowhead area north of Highway 50, followed by the industrial area north of US 50 and Mound House. Let's see, what do we have? About 40% of the people, 40% of the jobs in Carson are served by residents of Carson City. And then we had like 11%, I think, were coming in from Reno, and 8% in Dayton. And then the rest of the jobs, people were coming in from other areas. There was about 22,000, let me go back. There's about 22,000, 23,000 jobs, I think, in this data, 2021 or 2022. And there was like, 300 or some, 280 jobs that people were leaving Carson City and tending to in the Dayton area. We conducted some public outreach and public and stakeholder outreach. Some of the strategies that we used to do this included an online survey, emails, phone calls were solicited, contact numbers, people could call in and provide comments, social media. There was a website that was, or information on the web, on the CAMPO website. We did a press release and provided a fact sheet and flyer. We did a business walk. We went out through the corridor and knocked on or contacted all the businesses within the study area and talked to people. Some people didn't have much to say. We just gave them the information, provided them access to the study. Some people gave us an earful about their experiences in the corridor. A lot of people said that it's very difficult to turn left, make left turns, obviously. The congestion, just personally over the years watching the corridor develop, you can definitely see a lot of congestion, and it didn't really let up as we went through the day in our business walk. We got about, 980 comments, I believe. So pretty good response. We also, in addition to the business walk, reached out to some neighborhood associations, including the Mount House NAB, is that right? The advisory board, sorry. And then we did board presentations. Kelly did presentations to CAMPO and NDOT as well. The results of the stakeholder outreach, we gave them a series of questions to answer, and you can see what are important to people. People travel the corridor daily and multiple times at that. And then those trips are for work and recreational shopping opportunities. Everybody drives a car, personal car, not many walking and biking, but there are people out there doing that. People felt like crashes and safety issues were pretty significant out there, as well as the congestion that they experience and travel time reliability. Some of the other responses included lack of safe places to walk or bike, which you can see is fairly evident as you go through the corridor. And then basically the most important thing people thought was that safe and efficient flow of traffic along 50 was the most important thing, followed by convenient business access. So as we went through this process, data collection, public outreach, some issues emerged. Obviously, traffic congestion and the reliability, which I mentioned, relatively high crash rates that exceed the statewide averages in some cases, lots of driveway access points, which means there's lots of potential for conflicts. And then inconsistent facilities. You have an asphalt multi-use path. In some areas, it's discontinuous or it's not marked or not obvious exactly where it is. And when we were on our business walk, people would tell us about how people would drive down the multi-use path to get to the next driveway in case they couldn't make a turn out. So then there's lack of ADA compliance. There's ADA curb ramps or lack of curb ramps that don't meet ADA grades. And then the disadvantaged populations, people affected by a lack of viable travel options. They don't have a car. They don't have the ability or good connections for modes of transportation that are not related to a vehicle, which can result in higher crash rates. The congestion caused by the conditions in the corridor create increased emissions. And then it's pretty sunny out there, so there are heat impacts associated with that as well. So we have developed some recommendations that speak to the things and the areas that we identified in talking to people, the public outreach, the data collection. We organize them in roadway segments and then per signalized intersections. So improvements specifically for signalized intersections related to signal systems, timing, that kind of thing. And the recommendations include better delineation, maybe curb and gutter, striping, signage, improvements, lighting. Lighting is one of the things that NDOT's going to include on their 3R project. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then, of course, sidewalk, multi-use path, connectivity, improvements to that. Signalized system recommendations included improved signal coordination. There were some other technology-related things that you can do that we made improvements. Are a little bit different technologies than what people are used to or have seen around here, but proved to be very effective if they can be implemented. Those include, protective phasing, improved pedestrian crossings, including pedestrian hybrid systems, and that type of thing, which are detailed in the report. Some of the key recommendations related to speed policy or speed management. We recommended a range of improvements related to ITS. There was an ITS component originally in the NDOT project. It's no longer in there at this time, but I think there's an opportunity for the NDOT ITS to possibly pick up that ball and run with it and complete fiber optic connectivity through the corridor. But anyway, some of those speed management systems rely on ITS type systems for variable speed limits, improving the data collection, traffic cameras traffic and speed sensors, so you can observe and see the traffic speeds and the conditions and the congestion and how traffic is flowing. Mid-block crossings, particularly in the areas where there's a lot of space between the signalized intersections, putting in those mid-block crossings. Pedestrian hybrid beacons, there's an example of one on the lower right picture there. I have not seen one in Nevada. I was in Utah a couple weeks ago, and I went through one, and I have to say they're very effective devices. You see flashers or continuous flashing yellow lights, but they don't really do the same thing that these systems do, where if a person is waiting to cross, there'll be the bottom light flashes yellow. These will show a little bit different, but the bottom light would flash yellow. Then the person begins to cross, the top two lights become solid red. People have to stop. Then as they complete their crossing and they're gone, then the top red lights return, they flash for a minute, giving the opportunity for the vehicle driver to stop and then continue, and then they go off. So pretty good, pretty high visibility. You get the idea that there's something on the road and really help improve the conditions. Median curves and channelization also will help both reduce speeds and safety for pedestrians crossing. And then intersection geometry, adjusting some corner turning radii, including pork chop islands, giving pedestrians the opportunity to get out of the way, give them a safe zone in the roadway. So NDOT, as we mentioned, is planning a 3-hour project, which is a pavement rehabilitation project between the ramps, the I-580 ramps out to Deer Run Road. They do own and maintain, obviously, the Highway 50 through the study area. They're going to be redoing the pavement. They're doing their typical components of a 3-hour project, signing, striping. They're also going to be adding some minor widening to improve channelization at, I think, Deer Run Road and Airport Road. So new roadway surface, lane turn lane channelization, some minor drainage improvements. They are going to be picking up some of the gaps that we identified in the corridor study and the multi-use path connectivity, making some improvements to that, upgrading the ADA facilities, the curb cut ramps. They are going to be adding corridor lighting. The fiber optic is listed here, but that's no longer part of the project. And then there's some minor traffic signal upgrades. The project manager at NDOT told me their 60% design level is scheduled for completion in November. And that's important because that's kind of when they don't really allow any more changes beyond 60%. And then through the rest of 2026, they have to acquire some minor right-of-way. It's going to take some time. So they're going to plan on advertising for bids towards the end of 2026, which starts construction in probably the early second quarter of 2027. So next step, we've provided the corridor study with a menu of improvements to NDOT. They are looking at those. We had about $13 million rough program level estimates for all of the improvements that we identified. Obviously, they're not going to add $13 million of improvements into their project, but there are some that they're picking up and going to run with. But they're currently going through that list now. I don't think they're ready to say what's in and what's out, but they're working on it. The other thing is deciding when NDOT decides what they'll be able to include in the project, look at the funding options for those other items that CAMPO or Carson City may want to pursue. There are some funding options in terms of grants available. And then since a lot of the systems involve the traffic signal systems and new technologies. NDOT coordination with Carson City Public Works to potentially implement those changes. And that concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Does any member have a question? So, Mr. Novak.
I'll wear my vice chair hat. And what happens in Lyon County?
What happens in Lyon County?
Yeah, you went over all the Carson City stuff.
Oh,
And I think we have some folks that are interested in Lyon County. So I'll start with that.
yeah. Commissioner Novak, our study limit did go to Highland Drive. So we looked at the conditions at Highland. We came up with, we looked at implementing a pedestrian hydrant beacon there. There is the phase 2 of the project, which would enable CAMPO to extend the project limits into Mound House. NDOT did do a traffic speed study out there, and they have a project, I think, to make some changes in the speed limits, at least for short-term improvements. But in terms of what our study looked at was just getting to the Highland Drive area. We recommended short-term pedestrian hybrid beacon that may work there to improve some of the safety elements.
A couple other things. I know you're focused on the existing capacity and lane usage and traffic signals. I didn't see anything in it about future traffic signals at unsignalized intersections. And if you're going to look for the whole corridor using NDOT's access management standards, where would you want those signals to be? How do we consolidate driveways? So I don't know if that will come up in phase 2, but we're looking at this corridor that in the regional transportation plan is overcapacity in the future, that I don't think we're going 6 lanes through Mound House, but there's going to be heavy congestion and we expect more traffic signals to go in. So I don't know if that needs to be in this part of the study or in the future phase. I know it's NDOT's roadway, but I'd like to look as far in the future as we can because those signals have been put in one at a time. Well, it looks like we've got a corridor that should be analyzed all at once, and I really didn't see that in here. So I'll stop at that.
I think that I really appreciate those comments. And I think that we can look at a holistic view of the congestion and possible signals or roundabout solutions at intersections throughout the corridor. And again, we're extending the limits, but it's not going to only focus on Mound House. It'll still be the whole corridor. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. I was shocked at the survey results indicating only 17% pass-through traffic in this corridor. I think the perception, at least my perception previously, was this was mainly a pass-through corridor, and that's how it's designed, and that's how it feels when you're in it, right? It's not pretty, it's not landscaped, you go through it. And I think that's probably a testament to how Carson City has grown and evolved over time, and folks are using this corridor to walk and to shop and to be in that space. If the key concerns are traffic and safety issues, if the crashes are pedestrian vehicular conflict, I'd love for phase 2 to look at potentially speed reduction and recharacterizing how this corridor functions to reflect where our community is headed. I know there's been discussions about development and housing out further up the hill, off Deer Run and in those areas up there, and we should be preparing and planning for those in terms of the character of this corridor. So I'd love to see more of that in the next phase of this. Really good work. Thank you.
I think for me, what I see is several reports, right? Because different people are commissioning different activities to be reported on. What I don't see is a comprehensive view that I can put my arms around and say, what should we be doing in this entire corridor? And I think that's what we're all trying to get at, is we're going to be doing improvements for East William Street, and that dovetails up to, right? But I guess my concern is I'm trying to see the whole picture, because the other thing I don't want to do is spend money and approve component pieces when I don't get the whole picture. And I don't want to, sounds ridiculous, but tear something up or say, yeah, that was a great idea for this phase, but that's because I didn't know something I was going to get on the next round. And so I too don't see some of the inputs into this phase that talks about, and maybe it doesn't matter, and maybe that's our discussion point today, is when I already see the areas that got an F. So, right, are we gonna concentrate to correct the areas of F? So while I saw that, okay, only 17% said they were through traffic, it was shocking to see that only 40% of the jobs are held by Carson City residents. So that means 60% are not, that the jobs are held by somebody that's being imported into the community to work. So they're either coming from Reno, coming from Gardnerville, or coming in from Dayton, right? Or down the hill from Lake Tahoe. And so all these intersections that I saw with an F, how do those relate into our own RTC plans, right? Not just CAMPO, is how are we bringing all of this together so that every single decision we're making is furthering all the plans? And I guess that's what I'm concerned about, is I don't see how we're coordinating across the systems. And so I think each one is a professional, and Jeff's job is to do this phase and this road to that road, but there's more to this road to that road. And so I traveled that this weekend. I had to go to a funeral in Ely and coming through, and I thought, oh, I'm going to actually look at each of these roads and see. And I think something else that strikes me, I don't know that there's really these huge peaks. I think that roadway is busy all the time, unless any of you are seeing it different. I'm like, wow, it's 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I was shocked at how much traffic was trying to cut in and out, and how my husband would say this, right? But he just says, I can't believe how many people are willing to take their lives in their hands and just shooting out across when there wasn't a break in the traffic. It's like, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? So I would like you to tell me, and unless I miss something in these recommendations, and maybe you can flip back to the slide that rated all of the streets and the intersections for me. And really looking at that and saying, are we gonna, I'm assuming, right, the delay with the big old numbers. So I would look at US 50 and Empire Ranch, right? I thought the same thing. I thought, wow, 4,187.9. So, and then Flint Road, and all of us, I think that certainly both Mound House and all of these areas are like, wow. Are we going to concentrate on those areas first? So what is the particular recommendation that addresses this chart? I guess that's the connection I did not see. And maybe you can help me with that.
Jeff Hale for the record. I think what this study did, one of the things that it did was identify the existing conditions. For example, at Empire Ranch Road, level of service F for the northbound. And if you look at the delay there's 4,187 seconds of delay. What does that mean? Well, that means that you could wait there for over an hour before you would have a safe 5-second gap. So that's a problem. That's a crash waiting to happen. Are people sitting there for an hour? No, they're going.
They're doing
jumping
what I
out there.
said.
Yeah. So that's an opportunity. I think we didn't go through in this phase of the project and do a WARN analysis for where you have decided you want to put signal systems, but I think this is the tool for saying, hey, we have a problem here at Empire Ranch, and would be a good candidate for a signal system. So would, say, Empire Ranch Road, and what was the other one?
Flint?
Flint, yeah. Flint's another one. Anyway, that's kind of how we framed this information here. We didn't go the next step and say, okay, we're going to do traffic signal warrant analysis, and this would meet warrants for a signal. Obviously, signal systems come with crashes also. You saw the slide, the heat map. Those cause rear-end crashes, sideswipe. There are more severe crashes because people are going fast in those areas. So one of the things that CAMPO may consider in the next phase is, and maybe East Carson's not ready for it, but roundabouts are an effective tool. They slow traffic down. They do have accidents. You can't say that there's no crashes involved with the roundabout, but they're less severe. People are going slower. It's an angle. It's not head on. So it's something to look at in the next phase. And I think this data gives you the tool to say, hey, let's focus in here. Let's focus in there. Because we know we have a safety problem. We know we have something brewing. People are wanting to jump out there at a busy time of day and make that left turn at the Empire Ranch Road. And that's a residential neighborhood they're coming out of. So
It is.
Yeah, Jeff, if I can jump in, well, I guess, how does that fit in with the NDOT 3R project,
Right.
right?
That's,
And when everybody tells me safety's number one, I said, yeah, but it's 5 years away, you know? So what can we do now, or how do we, coordinate better? We're talking about repaving US 50. Well, does it get raised medians or not? I think we've seen on South Carson Street, you don't put in a raised median, guess what? People don't slow down, right? So what's NDOT's take on some of this stuff? Maybe just some raised medians around some of the intersections to help slow things down. But I think the timing is right to at least ask the good questions. So hopefully, it's a good report. It's got a lot of data, even got truck data in it.
Ton of data.
So,
a ton of great data that really illuminates some issues. I just want to understand when I say I'm approving phase one of the study, that includes recommendations, but I'm having a difficult time matching. So I guess I look at things more when I look to recommend something, to say more things like, I believe NDOT should focus a safety concern on Empire Ranch Road. Those are better recommendations in my eyes when I come to a report that gives me something, is to say, pretend, I know you have hundreds of millions, Rebecca's like, sure we do, Lori. But if I were helping to focus my $20 million that they have to do safety improvements, I was looking for this report to tell me, what would I prioritize with my $20 million? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to get to here? Because I think if I'm sitting on the other side of NDOT and I'm the design team, that's what I want to know, right? And I was, what should I be designing? What is it I should go hit this road in Mound House? So let me ask, where the pedestrian fatalities, where were those? Specifically, where were they? What are they in the F intersections?
I don't know. I think they were in the airport road. I think the crash data is in the appendix for the specific accident. Off the top of my head, I do not know.
Are they in the Fs?
There was three in Mound House, but I think that was in the more recent data. And then there was the 4 that were in town, Airport Road.
Does it make sense? What I'm trying to get at here, though, is to be, I guess I was a little surprised I didn't get a more specific set of recommendations to say, I do think the report has the data to get where we want to go, though.
Okay.
And I'm cheating and looking over at Rebecca from DOT, and maybe you can help guide me on something, does this data, this sheet right here, really help that plus the crash data really drive design options for you guys to tell you where to concentrate? I'm just wondering if this report brings you data that you need.
Well, yes. I mean, this information is good data, and we look at several different data elements as we, especially like Kelly mentioned earlier, with in conjunction with our One Nevada plan, we have 6 overarching goals, but each of those goals has several different data compartments. So you can never, in my mind, use too much data, right? It helps drive us with our decisions. But I appreciate what I'm hearing you say is you wanted this report to have recommendations and prioritizations. And there are several different types of reports. Data can help guide those, but that's kind of, this is helpful, but there's a lot of different data elements that would, come into play.
Okay. So help me then understand the phase 2 component. Because unless I missed what I was reading, that the phase 2 was then going to work on, again, not what I'm thinking. So phase 2 was going to be peripheral things for the roadways, like landscaping and things of that nature. So help me understand the phase 2 versus this phase 1. And it doesn't matter which one answers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I wanted to put in context as well that, I guess I'll answer your question first. Phase 2 can definitely incorporate these elements we've discussed today. And that was generally always the intent of the global corridor study. And unfortunately, due to funding limitations, we were sort of forced to narrow our project into some phases to meet the available funding at the time that it was received. And, had phase 2 not, known it was going to come forward, we may have tailored this report a little differently. However, we know that it is coming now, and there are elements in there that we wanted to study, including landscaping and more multimodal, but also access management. We were a little limited on our availability of looking at how we can consolidate driveways, how can we look at specific intersection improvements, how can we look at potential other frontage roads or behind network connections. We didn't really have that capability in this study in this phase 1 to look at all of those different components in a comprehensive way where we felt that we could provide a valuable recommendation. So this feedback, I think in particular, is good because it helps us narrow down, okay, here are our focus areas. We can work now through phase 2 and combining this together to a more cohesive, comprehensive study, which was always the intended goal. It just kind of got divided up because of funding limitations. What I think is important here to note is that another reason we wanted to do phase 1 was to really look at what can we help NDOT identify in terms of what they're going to be doing in 2027. It was 2026 at the time, projects, budgets move and things like that. But let's get a study going. Let's get some initial thoughts on, okay, there are some issues here. The data supports some of these issues. How do we provide that list of recommended improvements that could help solve some of these and provide that to the project manager, the planning team, and get those as many as, hopefully, fingers crossed, $13 million, Jeff said. If we can get $13 million, that's a huge win. If we can get $6 million, that's still a win. And without that study, without this phase 1 of the study, I can't say for sure that NDOT would be, say, if we said we need, these pedestrian improvements, these safety improvements, they'd say, like this board has said to us, staff in the past, of where's the data? Bring me the data. So I think we need that data to inform that, and we're going to get some of the recommendations. I'm confident working with Rebecca's team and the Assistant Director of Engineering that we're going to get some of those initial recommendations that we provided. Maybe not all of them, but without this study, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have gotten any. So I think your input's good, the board's input's good on how we can move forward, but I'm confident and super supportive of the work that's gone into this so that we can make sure we're making stepwise progress.
Well, I'm confident if you're telling me that phase 2 will build on this and bring it to more finite recommendations, then I'm a very happy,
Plenty of
I'm a
opportunity to
happy
work with
person,
parametrics and refine, if we need to make some tweaks, plenty of opportunity to do that. This input helps us get to that, what ultimately what we all want to see.
Right. Very, very good data. Ms. Maloney.
So just to be clear, is there discussion in here, did I miss it, on reducing speed on this section of Highway 50? If the answer is no, that's fine.
I think it
I'm
was
just asking.
variable speed, right? Wasn't it variable? A variable,
There-
where they could change it based on the time of day is what you,
Yeah, there,
had in
in
here.
the recommendations, there are elements that will result in lower speeds. Not necessarily anything that that redoes the speed limits, like, we didn't make a recommendation to go post at 35. But some of the items where, that we recommended in traffic signal system timing will have the effect of reducing speed. Basically, everything that we did, we feel, with the exception of the multimodal connecting the paths, will have the effect of reducing speeds. Pedestrian hybrid beacons,
I appreciate that. And the challenge and my concern is when you have posted speeds that are high and you have folks turning right and left and coming out and going shopping and walking, that conflicts with that high speed that's posted, even if you implement signal changes or signs or different things, we're essentially then building more conflict, right? And so if we're all saying the issue is conflicting high speed through traffic with slow speed use of the corridor, then potentially, I guess what I'm suggesting is we include recommendations to lower the speed. The other thing that I didn't see in here was right turn lane pockets, which is another kind of contributor to crashes and those rear end crashes that you mentioned, right? Where the light turns green, everyone wants to go, but the second guy in line has his blinker on and he's going right. And so people are accelerating into a stop. And so if there's opportunity to maybe narrow travel lanes or shift traffic and build in right turn pockets where people can safely decelerate, that can create opportunity to shorten pedestrian crossings. It can reduce the time that the light needs to be red for pedestrians to cross the street, and it can decrease overall delay. And so those are the types of kind of comprehensive approaches that I think the mayor is suggesting, and I hope that we can get there in phase 2.
okay. Sure. Ms. Schutte.
Thank you. Are frontage roads a consideration in any of these areas? I just
I'm
think
sorry,
about the
say that again.
frontage roads.
Oh,
like,
frontage
so I
roads.
think of
Pedestrians?
business access and.
Jeff Held for the record, putting crosswalks across the crossroads where the pedestrian paths cross, some better lighting and better signage at those points are really the only thing that we had that were kind of back away from the roadway itself, but we didn't have any recommendations related to frontage roads.
Okay, thanks.
I thought you had, I thought there was. I'm not so sure about that. Didn't you have some in there, or maybe it was the businesses or you that talked about the vehicles were traveling on some of the paths and the
Not,
frontage?
they weren't formal.
And they
frontage
should have
roads.
like a bollard or something put in there so that they, nice try, but you don't belong on this way to get around the traffic concerns, or not supposed to shoot off to the path. And that was the other thing we see. We saw all over the Lyon County area yesterday how many use their ATVs to run to the grocery store and stuff and are just cooking. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about, dust everywhere. And I'm like, wow, they're using those areas that were not built or intended or designed for those. And so I see kind of what was discussed here. There's all these different built-in conflicts that you certainly can see why crashes occur, right? And you're like, wow, it's mind-boggling to me what people will do. And you're like, wow, just stop and let the traffic clear or something, but they don't. They rush out in the middle of traffic and do crazy things. But again, I think you have superb data that probably gives me a lot more pause when I saw this particular chart. I was like, oh, that's 1 hour. That's not good. right? And no wonder but again, no wonder they're darting out because they get so frustrated. And so I would love to look forward to phase two, maybe again honing in on some of those. So, go ahead, Mr. Dotson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one of the things that I saw in this report is right from the title of the report. It's a complete street study report. And so, you know, you're looking at all the complete street elements to incorporate in this corridor. And, you know, it's a relatively high-speed corridor, and there's going to have to be changes. And, you know, to me, everything, the recommendations point to reducing the speed to satisfy all the issues that are out there and the multimodal things that we're addressing in a complete street study. So I think that adds to, you know, maybe counter to the jamming as much throughput as possible. When you look at this thing, I just don't think it can be done. And I think that's what we need to take a look at. I was a little concerned about, and I'm glad you said that you've never seen one in Nevada, because the hybrid, pedestrian hybrid beacon, you know, you've got a recommendation in here to put that, you know, on some of these intersections where it's really a vehicle conflict, like we've talked about. And so I would be worried a little bit about, you know, I'm not saying that that's not important, but can that be done singularly without looking at the impacts of the vehicle traffic, you know, a signal, I guess, basically. I think that needs to be looked at a little closer. Those are my comments. Thanks.
And actually, I think if you would flip to the slide that, I guess I'm trying to understand something in the report. There was the slide that had the study that talked about the 17% throughput, but over on the far right, the slide had 71%, 29%, this one, yes. So I'm kind of going to go along with what Mr. Dotson's saying is when I look at what the public wants and what the survey flow, encourage the safe and efficient flow of traffic along with more focus on the through travel, 71% versus 29% on the driveway access points and things. And so I think I'm bothered, right? They are conflicting statements in and of themselves. They are. They're flat conflicting. So when you're going to do design and when you're looking at things, which takes priority? Is it that even though we got a survey of the stakeholders in the public telling us what they want, are we going to go to 6 overarching One Nevada plans that say you have to take these things into consideration, so we're going to force things on that the survey results did not deliver? It's an honest, right? They are not the same answer. Those two things are not. Speed limit would be the perfect example, right? If you reduce the speed, let's use that as an example, to 35 instead of 45 when you're coming up out of Mound House and going, the traffic is already backed up. It is already Fs at these intersections. If you change the speed limit to 35, am I going to get more Fs? I really want to know, am I going to get more intersections with longer delays because I still have to put the amount of traffic through that flow through? No matter what, I got to get the traffic through. So if I'm slowing the speed limit and putting in stoplights and forcing things, I'm going to have more backup. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, to your point, it's a good point, but I think there's things you can do for signal timing. If you're going to have those signal systems, you time it for 35 and you get people trained. If I drive 35, I'm going to make it all the way through this without stopping. And that's one tool in addressing that.
It hasn't seemed to work on College Parkway. What's the speed limit we're supposed to be able to go and get through every light on College Parkway? Because wasn't that the try there?
I'm not specifically familiar with what it's timed to be on College Parkway.
Right.
Um,
But I see what he's saying.
Speaking back to the traffic signal and the level of service slide, I wanted to note that what was shown up there were individual movements, not individual intersections. And so there are individual movements, as was shown in that slide, that have level of service F. That doesn't necessarily mean that Highway 50 in particular, those movements have a level of service F. And so depending on what movement you're looking at, you may have different levels of service for that movement. And this is obviously a technical thing, but
Yeah, you're going to have to run that past.
yeah, so
Looking at this
if you
chart,
look on
be a
this
little more
particular, if you look
specific.
particular here, you see the first one down, US 50 at Airport Road, you see the level of service, third one down of D and F. That's east for the eastbound left movement. That's the worst movement, eastbound through movement. So those individual motions, turning left, eastbound through, or eastbound left, those have that level of service of F. But that doesn't mean
Oh, the
every
entire
movement is
intersection.
a level of service F, or the entire intersection level of service F. So additional signalization or retiming of the signals may actually improve overall intersection. That could mean other movements become level of service D to E or C to D, but maybe the overall intersection improves. So that's part of what you balance when you do a traffic impact study like this, or like any of the ones that we do, is how do we look at the overall, how do we look at the highest movements? Obviously, something like an eastbound through level of service F, that's a concern, but something at a minor road at a level of service S may be less of a concern if there's only 1 or 2 cars a day
Right,
as
that
compared
would-
to the tens of thousands of cars a day. So we have to be careful when we see
Yes.
these numbers and what they mean in what context, depending on the location.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Novak?
One last thing, I know we've been discussing this quite a bit, but under phase 2, there's some things that we really need to include that weren't. And I think part of it you mentioned, we're going all the way to the Virginia City turnoff. So there's a lot more to consider through Mound House, and make sure you're consistent with that. And then we all know what the current land use is in this corridor. But land uses change over time, and Carson City is working on the master plan update. So, let's look as far in the future as we can, and what type of development do we expect in this corridor? And so talking to the planning folks should help under the phase 2
Well,
study
in
as
Lyon
well.
County
And
too.
Lyon- oh,
What are they
absolutely. Yep.
got planned for their,
Okay, that's all I got now.
the Mound House people may know the answer, but okay. Anybody else? Okay, is there any public comment on agenda item 5A? Come on up, and then I'll take Melinda after that. Yeah, oh, green.
Go green.
Green means go.
Donna Inverson, I'm president of the Historic Virginia and Truckee Trail and also board member for Muscle Powered Citizens for a Walkable, Bikeable Carson City. I want to say that I was very pleased to see that this really was a complete streets
Review.
study. And that really this was looked at, and the multi-use path that is already there that needs a lot of improvement was really looked at. Couple of things I would, and I was really pleased to see that it was recognized that there was a big population in this area that is involuntary non-drivers, and they need to be recognized. Would like to point out that I do a lot of tabling for both organizations where I get a lot of people talking to me about if they had safer, more comprehensive, connective, multi-use paths, they would be bicycling rather than being driving, which would take a lot more cars off of the roads, less congestion. And I would like to say too that Carson City has a good start in multi-use path system, but we need to be proactive and not drop the ball. I'm concerned there's going to be a new development right there at Draco of quite a few houses being put in. So as we look at building our multi-use path system, we need to make sure that with the new developments that we're connecting to, like the multi-use path along Highway 50. We've made a few mistakes. The new path that was put in along South Carson Street, and even the path that is already there on Highway 50, there's no connection to the shopping centers. You have to go down the driveways to get to the shopping centers. Got a beautiful path. There's a rock disconnect to get into the shops. That shouldn't be happening. We need to make sure that we get the connection. So the new developments that go in, the city needs to be working with with CAMPO or with NDOT to make sure that we add the multi-use path systems to connect up to the spine systems. The Historic Virginia Truckee Trail, we're working very hard that we will have a multi-use path that is going to be going all the way from Gardnerville to the dam at Lake Tahoe, with our connections with the TPT and the Martin Slough, and from Carson City to Virginia City. So I would like to see also that this multi-use path goes all the way, not just from Deer Run Road, all the way to Dayton.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Cash?
Okay, Melinda Cash again. This report right here is really upsetting to me, only because I live off of Linehan Road and have for 35 years. And our community, many of our community members are seniors. And every single board meeting, I get complaints, they can't get out onto the highway. I mean, the traffic is nonstop from Dayton to Deer Run Road. There's no stoplights, there's no roundabouts, there's absolutely nothing. So once that traffic leaves Dayton, it is a racetrack from there to Deer Run Road. Everybody knows we need a stoplight. I mean, that is ultimately the true answer. We need to slow traffic down. My biggest concern, and always has been, is we have school buses that have to have to go across 5 lanes of traffic to be able to go to Dayton schools. It's so dangerous. They can't get across, and there's busloads full of kids, okay? And then not only do we have the school buses, which has always been my biggest concern, but we also have a heavy industrial area. We have the mine, we have steel, we have cement plants. We have 18-wheelers, and what happens is they just pull right out in front of the traffic and bring the whole traffic to stops. It's the only way they can get out. I'm hoping that we'll take this seriously, and do something, because, the big Traditions development's going in. I think that's like 6,000 homes to the east of us, and there's just no control. I mean, something's got to be done. So, thank you.
You're saying Lyon County has a 6,000 home?
I think it's Traditions. I think it's the great big huge one, and it's been approved. And we already have that huge jump.
They have conditions of approval that look like things we do, but.
Well, they are going to put another stoplight at 6 Mile Canyon, approximately where Traditions is. I'm not sure the exact, but there's no new stoplight, and the developer's paying for that, which is wonderful. But there's no new stoplight to slow anybody, or roundabout, or anything to slow anybody down coming through, coming through our community. And I was one of those commuters for 30 years, so I understand having to use that route to go to and from home. But hopefully someday we'll do something about this problem. But the F's, that really is a concern.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have any other public comment on this item? Mr. French.
Thank you, Chair. Denny French. I appreciated what you put out as far as a program, but it's way over my head. One of the things that Mayor Bagwell suggested is, I can't wrap my arms around it. It's a lot of great data, but it's not cohesive enough from my palate. I can't quite get it so I can swallow it yet. So the deal is also, I would like phase 2 to consider the fact that with the growth in population, we are going to be looking at, as was brought up, other alternatives like trails and paths and such. And again, I would like those not to be asphalted. That's another matter. But I would suggest that bus stops be incorporated with all the thinking, and bus in loops or pull-outs or pull-intos, so that they're not stopping traffic. Everything that was said about the need for a stoplight at a specific area, I'd love to have one at the dump. I'd love to be able to come out
That's
of
on
there
here.
without
That's
trying.
linked.
Right. And so to me, that would be very helpful. Sometimes I make a right because there is no left option. And then I'm still having to gun it in my little car. And I'm so grateful to have it because they won't let me walk or ride a bike to dump my junk up at the trash. But also I would just like take this little bit of time to say, anybody that hasn't been up to the dump, please take the opportunity that you might have a cool evening or before they close or early in the morning. The view from up there is amazing, and the way that they take care of the dump area has been exceptionally great and appreciated. And so I'll finish my statement with suggesting that the bus stop situation we don't have now because we don't have the routes. With future considerations of transportation and the age changes and the driving habits changing, I believe that we got to incorporate those in whatever plans we're making for landscaping or other considerations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else coming up? Good afternoon. Nope, gotta push it back. He made it green for you.
Oh, great. Am I green? Yeah.
You're green.
Okay. This is my first introduction to the study, and
Put your name on the record.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
My
okay.
name is Mark Costa, Carson City resident. This is my first introduction to this study, and we can see the mounting traffic occurring eastbound and in both directions for that. What I would ask, though, is that I'm hearing about new housing developments and new businesses moving in, and it seems like there's going to be a significant amount of work that's going to have to be done once these recommendations come out on what to do about this situation. And I think we need to go ahead and take that into account for these housing developments. I don't know how far they are in terms of approval, but what needs to be done also is if the developers or the businesses, whoever's going into this, should have to go ahead and participate in the solution for this, to include participating in the cost for that. I've seen it many times when my days of where I worked at NDOT. They would approve a housing development somewhere with no thought about transportation. And then suddenly you have big traffic jams, unsafe situations, and we're trying retroactively to go ahead and get the situation corrected. So I'd like, for, it's not only in the realm of Carson City, I understand that, but I'd like us to go ahead and continue that or consider that, in terms of proactively addressing situations and solving problems and getting input and cost, funding the cost for some of these recommendations that is going to be coming out of phase 2 and coming out of NDOT. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Formaster, I think you had your hand up.
Hi, as you know, my office is on Highway 50.
DD Formaster for the record.
This is DD Formaster for the record with the Rural Center for Independent Living. It is absolutely horrifying to pull off on that highway, and usually when I'm in my office, I take the back road down to the signal that is right there at Slaw World. pull in there and then take that around to get on the highway, because 5 to 6 o'clock, it is like Roger Racer has taken over the place. And also, I have major concerns about right-hand turns. When the pedestrian is entering the walkway, often people do not look. And so they often run over people making a right-hand turn. And I know several of my clients have been hit in the last 6 months with the right-hand turn thing. So maybe putting a sign up that says, please be aware, look both ways before you make a right-hand turn, or something like that, or even a blinking light there in the right-hand turn lane, letting people know that somebody is coming across the crosswalk, because I have to say that that's probably most of the pedestrian accidents that occur. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else? Okay, then I'm going to bring it back up to us. Do anyone want to make a motion or discussion? Miss Maloney?
For me, almost every comment has come back to how scary it is because of the speed, and I'm struggling with approving this without any recommendation to reduce the speed. And I don't know if there are others on the board that feel that way, or if it's too late to incorporate an additional recommendation to look at that.
I think unless I've missed discussion today, and so this is my understanding that can be looked at in the phase 2. I just want to make sure, because I think all of us are indicating we don't want some of the elements, and potentially the motion can be to approve phase 1 of the study, including the comments we made on the record for phase 2. And that gives, I think, maybe a little more comfort to what we expect to see in the phase 2 discussions, so that the record is clear for that, because I think that would make us all feel a little bit better on that. That these aren't just, again, that this is only phase 1. So the final piece that puts it all together is phase 2. We'll move these and then get more finite, unless I missed. Is that accurate? You're going to get more finite, so you can then listen back through our tape from today and say, okay, they want to know about X and Y and Z. And so that those will be incorporated in the phase 2 response.
And I see this report and the discussion on the record of really providing the foundation for phase 2 and for the recommendations, along with the other scope of phase 2, but definitely the recommendations, as well as how to mitigate these problems, how to make it a safer corridor.
Do you have enough to in phase 2's project to do what we're talking about? Is it gonna eliminate some items of review in phase 2?
I don't think so at this time. I really appreciate the feedback and guidance and focus of this phase 1, so that we can build into phase 2 what we want from the data. I really appreciate your feedback that helps us guide what we want phase 2 to become. And that has helped me solidify and communicate to the many agencies. This is a very unique plan in the fact that this is MPO sponsored. However, we're working on an NDOT-owned road in Carson City and Lyon County. And so the decisions ultimately will not be the MPOs. And so it's very important for the MPO to make the correct recommendations. And so I really appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you.
Is the path I'm suggesting sufficient for you to, we're approving the work, that Mr. Hale's team has brought us today. Because I think that's maybe what I want to say on the record is I think all the data elements, right? But the phase two, I expect a little more finite discussion. Does that seem fair that all we're really saying is the phase one is wet our whistle, right? Yeah, it's useful information and it's helpful, but it didn't refine what we want to see for recommendations. Do you have more on that, Ms. Maloney?
Well, I don't want to lose an opportunity because with the NDOT 3R project, if there are other board members that are concerned about speed, now is the time to get that recommendation in there. If we wait till phase two, we missed an opportunity to explore that as part of the 3R project. And so if there are others that feel that way, I'd love to get that specific recommendation in as part of this phase one.
I could start. I mean, this is NDOT's roadway, but NDOT has a speed management policy, and I would ask that it be used in the design of your 3R project. Since you're going to 60% later on this year, have you used the speed management policy in this particular corridor? I don't know why not. Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
comment?
Watson. Mhm.
There is a recommendation in the report to design the roadway to a lower design speed from Lampa to Highlands. So, to me, it's in there.
Right.
And
When I asked earlier, they said no. So if it's in there, that's fantastic.
I think that in my mind.
That's why I said I thought the bollards are in there. I think some of it's in there, but they're not just drawn out as direct, like you said, recommendations. And so what about if we try something like, I move to approve phase one of the study with additional phase one recommendations to include phase two considerations discussed on the record? And are we on the right path here? So that we can move along, because I know there's a technical component to close this phase and then move, but would that meet what we're all trying to accomplish?
That's great. Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. So how about I give that one the motion then? I move to approve the phase one of the study with additional phase one recommendations to include phase two considerations discussed on the record.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let the record reflect that was unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Hale, for all the hard work. And hopefully, I don't know, do you get great feedback on studies, right? He's like, oh my goodness. But it actually speaks to the great job of the data. Right, is because we're able to have a discussion. So thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move to agenda item 5B, which is discussion and possible action regarding an application for the distribution of $193,493 in available federal transit Section 5310 program funds to the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission for the capitalized operating expenses of Jump Around Carson, assist for our ADA paratransit. Kelly, is there anything new? We've already approved previously, but anything you need to share with any of us about anything special on this application award?
CAMPO advertised a call for projects. There was one application received from RTC totaling $193,493. RTC identified sufficient local match, and CAMPO staff recommend awarding the full amount to the RTC.
Does any member have a question? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion, please. Ms. Schutte.
I move to award the RTC $193,493 from the federal fiscal year 2024 FTA 5110 funds for the capitalized operating expenses of the Jack Assist Paratransit Program.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now moved to agenda item 5C, discussion and possible action regarding the application for the distribution of $262,928 in an available federal transit admin 5339. A program funds to the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission for maintenance improvements of bus and bus stop facilities and the replacement of an American with Disabilities Act accessible transit vehicle for Jump Around Carson. Ms. Norman, anything special or stuff to highlight for this one?
So again, on May 21st, CAMPO advertised a call for projects for the federal fiscal year 2022 and 2023 FTA 5339A funds and the federal fiscal year 2024 portion funding for the total amount of $262,928. One application was received from RTC. RTC's application seeking $144,458 to go towards the replacement of an ADA accessible bus. This vehicle replacement subject to a 15% match. And $118,470 of the total is for facility maintenance and improvements, and that requires a 20% match. And so the full amount is for $262,928. CAMPO recommends awarding the full amount to the RTC.
Does any member have a question? Is there any public comment on this item? See, Mr. French.
Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Chair. I was a little disappointed that it didn't really spell out some of the spending, the bus, but on the improvements of the bus stops. I've asked several times, and it's been acknowledged that I've said it. I feel there are some design issues with the bus stops themselves. The sheltered bus stops are not, I think, conducive to feeling safe or comfortable. The visual aspect of trying to wait for a bus, staff really have to stand outside of the shelter to look for it coming because of the advertisements on the left sides of many of these. And so that's been a problem, and I think lighting should be considered in some of the areas. And so I was looking forward to having that as part of this, and I'm hoping that it is, but that it just wasn't where I could see it physically, get a chance to look. So you can confirm or they could confirm or didn't, whatever my request has been. But there was talk about redesigning the whole unit, the whole shelter unit at one point, and that sort of faded away in the years. And I think it really needs to be revisited if we have any money that's been given to us through a grant. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have it? Anybody else? Just one last call. Okay. Ms. Norman, is there any plan that we have that's going to redesign our shelter structures, the bus stops?
What CAMPO knows of RTC's plan is what is in the project description, which is a portion of the funding will be the replacement of the rolling stock, and a portion will be the facilities maintenance and improvements of bus and bus stops and redevelopment areas in Carson City, including the downtown transit center. The exact bus and bus stop facilities, CAMPO staff is not aware of at this time. But the bus stop facility improvements can include the ADA compliance, new replacement shelters, shading, fencing, signing, and lighting.
So, to your knowledge, though, we have not designed a new shelter bus stop methodology. I can't recall that we had anything. I think I'm just trying to get it on the record to answer the question, but
Putting
we have
on,
not.
I'm switching hats.
Right.
Just put that on the record as,
Yes.
and speaking as the Regional Transportation Commissioner, as the applicant to the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. Part of the plan for this funding is to look at replacement shelters at the downtown transfer center. We've heard a number of concerns over the years. I'm sure Commissioner Maloney remembers some of the concerns about visibility and things like that. We have been looking at some alternative shelter designs that move the advertising to the other side, limit, maybe there's more glass in there, angling the walls instead of having squared walls. So there are some other shelters designs out there that we've been considering that we could continue to consider for future bus shelter purchases.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and no one else has any other questions? Okay, then I'm ready for a motion if someone would like to make a motion. Okay, Mr. Erb, thank you.
I move to award the RTC $262,928 in the fiscal year 2022, 2023, and 2024 FTA 5339A funds for maintenance and improvements of bus and bus stop facilities and the purchase of an ADA accessible transit vehicle.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay, we're now on to our non-action items. Thank you, Ms. Norman. We will have agenda item 6A, the Transportation Manager's Report. Mr. Martinovich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm switching hats again to the CAMPO Transportation Manager. Item here, the only one I wanted to highlight was that we've been working on an amendment to our regional transportation plan to incorporate some additional documents such as the local road safety plan, the Carson Area Transportation System Management Plan, potentially the US 50 study as well. That plan is out for its 30-day public comment period, so that period just started. So if you get a chance, you want to take a look at that, please do that. Knowing that we'll need to do a more comprehensive update of the regional transportation plan starting around this time next year. This is really an amendment to focus on incorporation of those elements and keep the progress going. So a lot of similarities in the version and the amendment, but just wanted to let everyone know that's out there for review. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item 6B, other comments and reports. What else do you have for us? Do you have anything under 6B for us? We've outdone ourselves for the day. How about any the members, though? Anything to report or share with anyone? We're good? We worked hard today, though. Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on then to our final public comment for CAMPO. Do I have any final public comment? Okay, then we are going to adjourn as the CAMPO. Take just 5-10 minutes. We'll be right back into RTC. Thanks for a good meeting. Transportation Commission. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Shudi. Here. Member Novak. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Novak.
Here.
Commissioner Dodson. Commissioner Maloney. Quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item number 3, which is our opening public comment. Just want to note for the record that we had one come in supporting the FLAP grant from Ernest Richards. So that's just for the record. Is there any other, Denny?
Hi, Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say I am for the funding. I'm just not real comfortable with not knowing exactly what type of road will be, how the road to the Ash Canyon trailhead. But in this case, what I want to bring up is the fact that RTC, Jack, and different groups have telephone numbers and such. I get myself together here. I'm sorry, I got off track. The main thing is that I feel that there should be someone on the phone or at least available through their whole hours of service. I've had situations, and I can't speak for anyone but myself in most every situation, especially in this, because I haven't heard too much feedback. A lot of people with smartphones can track the buses. They can physically see it on their little map. And then others can look up schedules and such. And, or if a bus has been delayed, I can make other options. But if I don't know about it, right up to that closing bus, it's important to me to know those things. Also, I just would really like to appreciate the drivers. I've only ridden once this month, or actually last month, and it just makes it possible for me to get out and walk. So I'd like to encourage everybody that gets a chance to say thank you to their bus drivers and to having, I'd like to see some of the routes reconsidered when the money's available, and I certainly hope that those turnouts are considered in the next phase of your overall plan for Highway 50 at Williams and such, and just thank you.
Thank you. And then I also want to note we received a public comment on the FLAP grant for support from Muscle Powered, just so that's on the record. Okay, do I have any other public comment? Come on up, Mr. Costa.
Good evening. My name's Mark Costa. I'm from Carson City. And it was understood from the July 12th RTC meeting that the final road preservation workshop or presentation would be held at the August 14th meeting. My point is there is a lot of information to cover at the August 14th meeting regarding this issue. Items for discussion should be the results of the surveys and exercises conducted at the March workshop concerning citizen preferences for a lower PCI objectives to maximize the utility of available funds and calculation of repair costs. Item number 2 is further explanation of annual cost calculation and the software used as requested, as previously requested. It would be useful towards determining the appropriateness of the 2 initiatives that are going to be on the November ballot, and would also assist with transparency for that. The project prioritization for Performance District 2 presented at last month's RTC meeting was informative. The qualification factors used to determine priority seem logical and comprehensive. However, how are these factors used to determine the ranking of street segments is not clear. Are numerical scores used? Are the criteria weighted or of equal value in determining the ranking? Or is this evaluation qualitative, just take into account the various factors that have been discussed? Given the complexity of issues to be resolved, And just allocating a regular RTC meeting to present and discuss the resolutions, it is very important the presentation is made available to the public as early as possible. So there is time to review it before the meeting and people can prepare their questions and are fully aware of what's being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item 4A, which is the approval of our minutes of June 12th. Does any member have any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5A, discussion and possible action regarding the Carson City 2024 Americans with Disability Act Transition Plan for Pedestrian Facilities in the Public Right-of-Way. Jared, you're going to take this one on. Okay, let's go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jared Cragen, Transportation Planner. All right. All right. The purpose of the ADA transition plan is to provide a framework for achieving equal access throughout Carson City's transportation programs, services, and activities. The transition plan is required by Title II of the ADA, and it pertains to pedestrian facilities located within the public right-of-way, such as roadways. Pedestrian facilities within the public right-of-way include sidewalks, curb ramps, pedestrian crossings, transit stops, paved shared use paths, and pedestrian activated signal systems. To comply with Title II of the ADA, Carson City is required to have and maintain a transition plan to document how an agency will make gradual progress towards development of a full self-evaluated inventory of barriers within pedestrian facilities located in the public right-of-way. In 2015, Kimley Horn prepared the first ADA transition plan and was later approved by the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission. The purpose of the plan was to provide an ADA transition plan for transportation facilities within Carson City, Nevada. The main goal for future plans is to have additional program, service, activity, and facility evaluations be completed to provide a comprehensive transition plan for all of Carson City's public facilities. And then based on the 2015 ADA transition plan, the main purpose of the 2020 plan was to provide the framework for achieving equal access throughout Carson City's programs, services, and activities. The 2020 plan expanded the inventory of transportation facilities to include the number of existing and missing curb ramps and the linear miles of sidewalk. The goal for future plans is to expand the inventory to include all accessible barriers. Title II of the ADA applies to state and local governments, referred to as public entities, and their programs and services. To comply with Title II, Carson City is required to have and maintain an ADA transition plan that makes gradual progress towards development of a full self-evaluated inventory of barriers within pedestrian facilities located in the public right-of-way. Title II requires that an ADA transition plan include the official responsible for implementation of the transition plan, an inventory of accessibility barriers, methods used to make facilities accessible, and a schedule demonstrating a strong commitment to eliminate the inventory of barriers. The 2024 ADA Transition Plan documents and reaffirms Carson City's methods currently in place to improve the accessibility of pedestrian walkways. The city employs a three-pronged approach to upgrading pedestrian facilities. ADA upgrades within Carson City are completed through the city's Transportation Capital Improvement Program. the city's development permit approval process, and the city's annual street maintenance program. So for the transportation capital improvement projects, all capital projects constructed by city departments are required to be designed to meet the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design. Capital projects that alter the roadway are required to provide curb ramps where street-level pedestrian walkways cross the curbs. Development permits, all new private construction is required to comply with currently adopted ADA accessibility guidelines. Existing development seeking permits for expansion or rehabilitation are required to comply with accessibility guidelines. And then for street maintenance, Public Works streets crews repair deteriorated concrete throughout the year. Repairs are prioritized based on safety, customer requests, and funding availability. Since the 2015 ADA transition plan, Carson City has developed an inventory of existing sidewalks, existing curb ramps, missing curb ramps, and signalized intersections and crosswalks in Carson City. In 2024, the inventory was expanded to include signalized crosswalks and intersections and ADA-compliant ramps. We brought in the definition of ADA barriers in Carson City to include interrupted and missing pathways, narrow access paths, ADA-compliant ramps, non-ADA-compliant ramps, and supports. From, all right. From the transportation projects, we had 47 ADA-compliant curb ramps installed in Carson City. Those projects were the Mountain Street Preservation Project, which had a total of 7, the Destoya ADA Improvement Project, which had a total of 8, and then the Colorado Street CEDBG Pavement Project, which had a total of 32. The street maintenance team installed 1 ADA-compliant curb, but completed the elimination of other ADA barriers along sidewalks. The 2020 plan expanded to showcase the removal of ADA barriers and the quantity of projects in Carson City. A city story map or an interactive map was created to help increase the awareness and garner the support of the 2024 ADA transition plan. The story map implements information provided by the community development, engineering, and street maintenance divisions of Public Works to help viewers of the map to understand the process of identifying ADA barriers and the steps taken to remove them. And currently, the link is open to the public. On August 8th, 2023, the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, or the Access Board, published the final public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, or final PROAG, in the Federal Register. Carson City plans to follow PROAG and the design of projects. Capital projects that alter the roadway are required to provide curb ramps where street-level pedestrian walkway cross the curbs. Certain maintenance and pavement preservation projects do not require adding curb ramps. However, all transportation capital projects evaluate pedestrian accessibility during project scoping in accordance with the city's adopted Complete Streets program policy. The ADA transition plan is a living document aimed at guiding investment to reduce accessibility barriers and to demonstrate Carson City's strong commitment to providing equivalent access to the maximum extent possible. The plan should be revisited at least once every 5 years to report the progress being made and report the inventory of ADA barriers in Carson City. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member have a specific question? Ms. Schutte?
Hi, thank you. Regarding customer requests, when a customer requests that an improvement or something be fixed, does that get compared to other earmarked projects already, or does it automatically go to the top of the list? Do you know?
I'm not too sure. I would have to ask Christopher Martinovich.
Thank you.
Depending on the nature of the request, Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager, depending on the nature of the request, oftentimes the need for reconstruction of a ramp or other failing sidewalk goes into our database where we track and make progress on improving driveways, sidewalks, other curb ramps and things like that. So we track that, we put that on our log, and we get to that typically on a first come, first served basis. So that's not, if you file a complaint or something, it doesn't necessarily come to the top. We tend to get them in the order that they come in, and we make progress on that. Streets maintenance particularly makes progress on that on an annual basis.
Okay, so it goes into the list.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
There are some instances where there are some critical, where we'll see like, oh, something's happened, maybe there's damage, maybe there's heat-related impacts, where we need to jump on them because they're hazardous, and we tend to do that on those instances.
Hazard triage.
Essentially, I guess.
Thank you.
And can I ask, since you're sitting right there, I had a call from a constituent that indicated she'd called for sidewalk repair and was told, see you in 6 years. Is our list out 6 years for sidewalk repair?
I believe our list is out into 2029,
Okay.
generally speaking.
Again, I just think it's important that part of the discussions on everything we're having, even with the potential new taxes and things of that nature, is what we break down into what and what should repair and shouldn't be repaired. And so I think, unless I misheard Jared, there are times when it is required that we do the ADA updates based on the type of road work we're doing, correct? So again, I just want to put it on the record for the public to understand that that's really what the board said. So if the treatment is required because of the type of road work we're doing, then it's going to be an eligible expense. But if it's just, not just, I hate to say it that way, but if you're on the list for a repair that's 6 years out, that's in our standard street maintenance dollars, unless we can find other grants to come in, right? So sometimes we take some money out of redevelopment funding for sidewalk repairs. So I just want to be clear. So
Okay,
we're out
our-
6
our
years right now. huh?
Transportation traffic engineer will be presenting on item 5B a little bit more detail on curb ramps and when we do those.
Perfect. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this?
Yep.
Mr. Novak?
I think it's a good report, and it shows we've been making progress. And I don't know how we rank with other communities in Nevada or NDOT, but I think we're doing as good a job as we can, given the money.
Given the resources.
Yep.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Denny?
Thank you very much, Chair Denny French. I want this on the record. Mills Park construction has put people onto the north side of the walkways, and the walkway goes right over a space in the sidewalk that's in such bad shape that were I in a wheelchair or such, I wouldn't have been able to get across it. So I just want that little, like you're saying, it's got to get on the list. And if everything's 5 or 6 years and you say triage, I think that's an awesome way to put that. Thank you. But that's my observation. Plus, there are signs all over the place that are misdirecting people. Dee Dee brought up the situation with her husband. That was one situation where there was construction on one side and the other side of the sidewalk was also being worked on, but that sidewalk was open. Mills Park area, I would really like everybody to take a look at how they're rerouting people, which put me on a path in the sun, in the heat of the day. My choice to be out, but I intended to be able to walk through Mills Park from Walgreen. And I had to cross the street, but it's not a terrible thing to have done, or the distance terribly expanded or lengthened, but that there were hazards along the way. I was able to move one myself, but I can't take care of the sidewalk part. So if someone could take a look at that. But I think also there's a whole bunch of signs by construction people that are just being left out. Detour signs that don't lead anywhere or have anything to do with anything. And that's frustrating for a driver. As I went down 5th Street, I was on the wrong side of the street trying to follow their directions. But the lady doing the direction was very patient, and I got on the right side. But for me, the triage thought, and if we can all be sort of patient, that would be great. But there are some situations that are like monumentally hard for that individual that's called. So just being told, hey, you're 5 years down, how about sending someone out to see if that is a hazardous thing, or maybe you could all figure out how to let that person know that there's a way around it for meanwhile, and that it is on the list. That was just a terrible way to have somebody connect with you. But thank you very much for your patience. I want to also say, I've got just a second, I misspoke. I was thinking about AF. I thought the comment was on that. So that's where I was saying I'm grateful for the grant, but I'm concerned about what they're going to do. So I wanted to clear that up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, is anybody else, any other public comment? If there's none, we'll bring it back up here. Ms. Maloney.
I think that, just a comment, that story map that you did is really fantastic. It's really fun to see some different technology used, and if it's possible to put that somewhere on y'all's website, it's very good. Really good job.
Does anybody like to make the motion?
I move to approve the Carson City 2024 ADA Transition Plan.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5B. This is a discussion only item, and I think it revolves around some questions that people have had in the community in prior meetings and things of that nature. So, Casey, talk to us about ADA design and construction.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so Casey Sylvester, Transportation and Traffic Engineer. We're going to talk a little bit about the specifications and the design of curb ramps. All right, so first I want to talk about sort of the anatomy of the curb ramp. We talked about these things. I want to make sure that we're clear, so I want to just go over each of these things. So of course, I'm going to see if I can grab my mouse here. Nope. At the top, we have the sidewalk, and then at the top of the sidewalk where the ramp starts to go down is the sidewalk landing. So there's two landings. There's a street landing and a sidewalk landing at the top and the bottom of the ramp. You have the curb ramp. You have a detectable warning, also called truncated domes, at the bottom of the ramp. Of course, we have our crosswalk in the street. There's the curb and the gutter. The gutter does overlap with the street landing, so there's some overlap there between some of these different aspects. Also looking at the image below that, we have sort of the sidewalk, the bike lane, and the traveled way. The bike lane usually constitutes the gutter area, would count in your width of your bike lane, and that all counts as part of the street landing, and we'll get into that a little bit more. We're also going to talk about slopes. A lot of the specifications revolve around the slopes, and so you have the running slope, which is the directional slope down the ramp. You have the cross slope going perpendicular to that, and you have the transition slope, which is the running slope for sort of the sides of the ramp. And the transition slope is only different from the running slope when the transition is not meant to have traffic on it or pedestrian traffic. All right, so a little bit on the history of this. A lot of the design standards are based upon the Americans with Disability Act, which was passed in 1990. Beginning in 1991, some guidance has been released into what that means. There have been multiple guidance since then, with the most recent being PROAG. Jared talked a little bit about PROAG. It was most recently adopted by the Access Board in August of 2023. But we've been aware of PROAG for a while, since before that. There have been drafts that have been coming out for PROAG since 2002. It's been being worked on since, I believe, 1999. And so our standards do meet PROAG, and that's sort of the basis for what our standards are based upon. Before ADA came out, there was very limited guidance relating to curb ramps. The running slope was generally defined as being 12-to-1, which is an 8.3% slope or flatter. However, exceptions existed, like you should do this. That's probably the best way to define it. It's a should statement, not a shall statement. The ramp width was not defined. The transition to the landing was not defined, so you could have a little lip at the bottom of the ramp. And curb ramps were just not required in many instances, and so they're not always used at that time. So things have changed since then. Guidance has been released. Like I said, PROAG is sort of the most up to date of the standards, or the most recent. It's controlling right now, and so our designs are based upon that. And just to run over what exactly that means, the running slope is still 12-to-1, but now instead of it being a should statement, it's more of a this is the absolute steepest slope you can have, or flatter, and it's not open to exceptions. The transitions have to have a 10-to-1 slope or flatter. You must use detectable warning or truncated domes. The landing to the street must be flush, so no little lip. And that's easier for wheelchair or even walker-based users to be able to transition from that ramp onto the street. You must provide a 40-inch square area that is outside of the traveled way. So just to explain that real quick, I'm going to jump back up to my slide here on our anatomy of a crosswalk. So the area at the bottom of the ramp in the street landing, which includes the bike lane if there is one, or the shoulder, can include the gutter. You must have a 48-inch square area that's outside of where vehicles travel. And that allows somebody who came down the ramp to make decisions about what they're going to do, not have a speed that was developed or something to that nature before they proceed across the street.
Can I double check something you just said there? I want to make sure.
Yes,
So, but that could be a bike lane or a shoulder.
it can.
So it's not, they get their own, not like whatever they did on the bike lane where the law was changed, you have to give them 3 feet. So it's inclusive of that area,
Yes,
but
and I would
it's
have to
4
go back
feet.
and look. I think turn lanes also can count. And so the traveled way is just the through vehicle. But it is to help keep them out of vehicles that are potentially traveling at a high rate of speed and aren't planning to stop. And they're not going to have a conflict where you came down your ramp and then a car came out of nowhere and
Right.
there was a collision. It gives them a space that they can be in before. All right, so the maximum slope of the adjoining surface, so in this case, this is usually the gutter, has a maximum slope of 5%. In some cases, if you didn't have a curb ramp right there, you could have your gutter be steeper, and that does happen in design, but at the curb ramp, 5% maximum. And then there's the maximum slope change. That's the combination of the two slopes coming together. That can have a maximum of 13.33. Very logically, if you take your 5% gutter slope and your 8.3% running slope, those add up to 13.33. So that's just to make sure that you're not going to have a very abrupt change at the bottom. And then there's also the defined width, 5-foot minimum width for the ramp, and the maximum cross slope of 2.1%. There are other publications that talk about design of pedestrian facilities, including curb ramps, such as the Urban Street Design Guide by NACTO, the AASHTO Green Book, and the AASHTO Guide for Planning, Design, and Operation of Pedestrian Facilities. But for the most part, these documents defer to PROAG. PROAG is sort of the most inclusive document as far as what the standards are. In the Green Book, you'll find some of those specifications included and some of them not, and other things not talked about at all. The NACTO and the AASHTO Guide for Planning and Design of Pedestrian Facilities talks a little bit more about layouts and, putting in a barrier or like a landscaping or something between your pedestrian facility and things like that. How are you going to lay out if you have a bike-specific lane, but you also have on-street parking? And those are the things that are covered in those guidance. So not exactly the same as the curb ramps. That's mostly covered by PROAG. So Carson City's standards, section 5.3 of the standard drawings, cover curb ramps. We have 8 different designs that are in there. It's based upon whether you have crossings going multiple directions across the intersection, it's a mid-block crossing, and things like that. Our standards entirely meet PROAG. In some cases, we're more conservative, but for the most part, we're meeting. And when I say more conservative, I just want to point out things where we have 1.5%. If you see near the bottom of the slide there, there's the directional, and there's a 1.5% slope for the cross slope, but normally in PROAG, that's a 2.1% minimum. We have a 1.5, so in some cases, we're being more conservative. Because PROAG has such specifications that are fairly well lined up with how that can be designed, if you go other places around the country, you're going to see very similar designs, things that are in many cases exactly the same. So on the bottom left here, we have an intersection in Sparks, and they have a curb ramp that's exactly one of their designs on the previous slide. If you look at this one in Minden, it's a little bit different because of the width of the sidewalk there, but it's meeting all of the design requirements that we have for our minimum. The one in Reno is a little bit different in that the pedestrian stays flush with the street, and even though they're inside of the island, we do have some cases that are like that. For the most part, we're not using those at signalized intersections exactly. So it's a little bit different, but it's also very similar. And I have another one here that's Athens, Georgia. You can jump onto Google, go on Street View, and just find random pedestrian crossings, and you'll see the same thing. In some cases, you see some older stuff, just like we have in Carson City. Across the country, transitions are happening, just like Carson City has in their transition plan. But if it's been completed in the last so many years, then it's going to meet these standards. And when I was planning this out, I had pictures in Pennsylvania and in Virginia and all sorts of places, and it's all the same. So when do we construct new ADA facilities? So Title II of the ADA requires, it defines when we are responsible for putting in new facilities. This isn't to say we couldn't go above and beyond as funding permitted, but if you're building a new facility, you must meet the ADA standards. And by ADA, I'm really referring to PROAG, but ADA is the law behind that. Pedestrian improvements. If you're doing work and you're not doing the road, but you are doing other pedestrian improvements, in the construction area, you are expected to do those improvements to meet PROAG. If you're doing road rehabilitation, so milling out, paving on top, that sort of level of work, even if we're not touching the pedestrian facilities, it would be expected that we would fix the curb ramps and put them up to standard. And then for preservation projects, it does not require. So if we're going to come in and overlay a project, generally a lower cost solution, the reason we're doing it maybe has something to do with budgeting and things like that. We wouldn't be expected to go in and pour concrete, which is usually a costly item. We could if our funding permitted it. And then if you're building a road that doesn't have pedestrian facilities, and I have an image here on the top right of Kuntz Lane, there's not a pedestrian facility on Kuntz Lane. If we went in and we did a repaving, even if we did full depth reconstruct, we would not be required to do any pedestrian facility work because there's not an existing one. All right, any questions?
Does any member have a question? Miss Maloney?
This is awesome. Thank you. One of the things that's being discussed is audible warnings when it's a signalized crossing. And I'm bringing it up not because of the curb ramp specifically, but I know there are design requirements related to the approach to the ramps and the distance from the audible signal and the buttons. Is our current design standard setting us up for success for when those audible improvements are required and when we have to move into those in Carson City, to your knowledge?
That's a really good question. For the audible signal detect, where the buttons beep, so there's multiple parts to that. There's whether when you press the button, does it make a sound? We do have that. That's something that I believe, I cannot be certain without going back to look, but that may be in our standards for that to be required. There's other piece of that is you can have the signal make noises when the phase changes to walk. You can have it make different sounds when it's in the flash don't walk phase. And I am not sure if we are accounting for that in our standards right now.
And that's totally fine. My comment specifically is there's requirements coming for the flat area and the distance from the ramp to the button and how that distance relates. And so when staff look at our standards for those, just making sure that to the best that we can when we're installing them, we're setting us up for success for when the next phase of continued stringent requirements comes upon us.
Yes, we are working on having those requirements be met. And there's different ways those are done. There's different arms you can get that kind of stick the button out from the pole, and we are using those. Thinking about some of our signal projects that are going on now are actually NDOT projects, and we comment to them, and we make comments like that on their plan sets. We want to see this on a 60% plan or whoever that might be. Off the top of my head, Appian's probably the only signal project we have going on right now. And I have not looked into it to whether or not those requirements are being included, but I would expect they are, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Dotson?
I was curious about the one ramp that was constructed by the Public Works folks. Is that Is that something that, how did it go? I guess, is that in the works, or is that just kind of a unique situation?
I don't know the location that they did. We can look that up. I don't recall the location that was specifically reconstructed. They do that periodically, and they're always constructed to ADA compliance. I'm not sure I answered your question, Commissioner Dotson, but
Just, out of all the ones that had been constructed, there was one there. And
I can find out more as to the reason that one and where it was. I just don't know that information right now.
doesn't sound like it's going to change anything in the future. I mean, more, or no plans to do more with the staff on those ramps.
Not to my knowledge, but I can find out more, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
So one of the projects we currently have going on is on Fifth Street. So there's a fine example of, I don't know how many ramps was in that because I didn't count it, but a lot. We did a lot of repair and change of all of those ramps. And again, it's because of the type of reconstruction we did on that road. We then had to do, I don't know, there was quite a few that we did in front of across the street from the school. It looked like all of those were getting done, and there was two, because those had sidewalks on both sides. So there was a great project. If you go by and look, you can see the improvements made for that one. But anybody else, any other questions? Okay, it's a non-action item, so thank you for bringing this forward and helping the public that's had questions on this and stuff, so thank you. Okay, our next action item is 5C, discussion and possible action regarding a determination that Nevada Barricade and Sign Company is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder pursuant to NRS Chapter 338, and whether to award contract 253-00014 for the 2024 Long Line Pavement Striping Project to, Abiskowitz, it looks like. But anyway, NBSCO for a total not to exceed $265,161. Brian, this is your project. Does any member have any questions about our long line one for this time for Brian? Yeah, it's pretty. I'm going to work hard to figure out how we can have more discussion with you.
Pretty basic.
Okay, it's an action item. Is there anything that the public has on this long line? Denny?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Denny French for the record. I just threw that in there so I'd say something different. The deal on this is, I was impressed by what I read, just of the agenda material. I appreciated that very much. Thank you. And I was also curious enough to go ahead and Google the company. I didn't get both Googled, but impressed very much by their site. The deals that they're into, I'm curious about the new paints. I did paint striping and such in Carpinteria, California, and it was just a crew, tiny crew. And we didn't have near the materials that they do now. So I just want to say, if you're half as good as your website suggests that you are very knowledgeable, and you definitely had somebody set that up very well, welcome and thank you.
Thanks. Okay, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion. Mr. Dotson.
I move to award the contract as presented and authorize the Public Works Director to approve expenditure of the 10% contingency if needed.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5D, discussion and possible action regarding a determination that Nevada Barricade and Sign Company is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder pursuant to NRS 338, and whether to award contract 253-0015 for the 2024 Short Line pavement striping project for not to exceed $189,524. Does any member have any questions of Mr. Elder on this contract? Pretty standard contracts that we do every year. Any public comment or questions on the Short Line? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Mr. Novak.
Ready? I move to award the contract as presented and authorize the Public Works Director to approve expenditure of the 10% contingency if needed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay, we're now on, we're getting there, you guys. We're now on to agenda item 5E, discussion of possible action regarding Amendment 1 to Contract 2330358 for First Transit, Inc., to add Section 2.1.2 to the contract, which updates the projected maximum billable hours, to remove and replace Section .51 of the contract to increase the contract not to exceed amount by $424.64 for a new total not to exceed $4,984,931 and yes, 10 cents. I can't skip that. For the initial 3-year term ending September 30, 2026, along with conforming revisions to the contract amounts associated with Option 1 and Option 2, and remove and replace Attachment G of Exhibit B of the contract to reflect changes to Federal Transit Administration's FTA-required contract clauses. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
Yes. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose conflicts of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My nephew is Chris Martinovich, who is employed by Carson City and will be presenting this item. Chris and I are not receiving compensation of any kind directly related to this item. It will not foreseeably impair or enhance the terms of his service with the city, and we are not affected by the outcome of this item to a greater degree than any other resident of Carson City. NRS 281A.420 only requires abstention in clear cases, and the independent judgment of a reasonable person in my position would not be impacted by my familial relationship. Therefore, I do not have a disqualifying conflict, and I will be voting on this matter.
Thank you so much. Mr. Martinovich, want to give us
Thank you, Madam
the
Chair.
highlights of what we need to know
Yeah.
here?
Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager. I don't really have a lot to add what's already included in the staff report. We're amending the contract to clarify the billable hours, as that was the primary reason, an error on my part in the calculation of the hours, as well as adjusting the not to exceed amounts year to year and making it not to exceed over a 3-year period. Adjusting the federal procurement clauses as a result of our recent FTA triennial review, which I'll give you an update on in the Transportation Manager's report. I did want to note that we did review through our federal processes as required by our procurement processes with our Federal Transit Administration, review of how did this amendment impact potentially the previous other bidders on the project, and we confirmed that everybody at the time of bid the same basic hours, so we're consistent. Everybody was using the same consistent number of hours, so the error would have occurred no matter who we selected, and so there's not a potential conflict there. So we confirmed that. I also wanted to note that the increase in this amendment was already budgeted as part of the federal city's fiscal 25 budget, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors, so there's no change to that. We'll consider it again as part of the fiscal year 26 budget going forward. Those are my comments on this. Happy to answer questions.
I mean, I don't know that I'll just have a comment, but it just really also shows how expensive it really is to have transit. It's heavily subsidized and just very expensive. And so when we get requests about expanding the service, when you see how much this contract is, and this is without buying buses or other operational costs, you can see how come it's extremely expensive. But don't have anything specific, buddy, on the contract? No? Do I have any public comment on this item? No? Okay, I'll bring it back up here for a motion then. Ms. Maloney?
I move to approve Amendment 1 to the contract as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. We're now to agenda item 5F, as in Frank. Discussion and possible action regarding the submission of a 2024 Federal Lands Access Program FLAP grant application for Federal Highway Administration for $6,361,000, including $410 local match to complete the Ash Canyon Road and Trailhead project. And who's gonna, you're back. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this project is, as you mentioned, to build a trailhead parking area, a storm drain facility, and to repave Ash Canyon Road from Winnie Lane up to the current paving limits, and then to construct a new road from the paving limits up to the project limits, which are about 300 feet east of the water tanks. Match is not required for a FLAP grant. However, generally it's reviewed it's reviewed favorably by the reviewer team if there is a match. So we've worked together with the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department, and we've got a $410,000 match that we are going to put towards this project. As of reviewing this project, we developed an estimate for $6.3 million for the project. We are requesting 6.3 because of that estimate. However, subject to additional federal contingencies in the application and the need to include escalation and engineering costs, we may end up needing to request a little bit more after we've reviewed that. Also wanted to note that the zoning of the parking lot area up on the northwestern side of the project has been cleared by the community development as being acceptable for us to build a parking lot there based upon the zoning needs. Just to break out the matching, we're going to use $200,000 from the Stormwater Fund. We're going to use $150,000 from the Regional Transportation Fund, and we're getting $60,000 from Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces. It's the Quality of Life Fund. And so that application is due on Monday. We're working with Parks and Rec to finalize the application. We're working on it now, and we should be ready to submit on Monday.
Does any member have a question? Mr.
Yeah, just
Novak?
questions or comments. I checked with Chris. The federal land you're accessing is Forest Service land,
That's correct.
and they're in favor of this as well. I don't know if you have a letter of support from them.
That's correct. We do have a letter of support from them, and as a federal land management agency, there is a specific form that they're to fill out and sign for us in addition, and beyond just doing a memo, and we already have that.
Okay, and then the last thing, if it is central federal lands and FLAP money, you do have the option to deliver the project yourself, if it makes sense that Carson City can design and oversee this. And I don't know if that'll save you any money or it's worth getting into, but there is an option. So federal lands doesn't have to take the lead.
Okay, we've spent some time discussing that recently. We weren't sure, based upon what's on the application, we sort of assumed going in that we would be designing it, but then in the past on FLAP projects, federal lands did. And it's just something we've been discussing internally, and so we want to be prepared to do it either way.
Yeah, that's why I said it's probably an option. They probably like coming here, but it also costs a lot of money. So it might be cheaper if you guys do it.
More to the project,
Right.
right?
So that's all I got to say.
Does anybody else have any? Well, it certainly can be a wonderful project, and again, for the record, we did get to public comments supporting the Ash Canyon, so nobody else has any? It's just a great project. I'm getting there. Wait till I announce it. Okay, I am ready for a public comment on agenda item 5F. Mr. French. He knew it was coming. I had a preemptive hand up.
Better ahead than behind. Thank you very much, Mayor. And Denny French, thank you. My concerns are just questions. And great guy to have right here to answer, but I have to look at you. The concern I have are the design factors. And if the federal is doing it, will we have a review of those or a community deal? And then also if city, then would be the same. Will there be a special permit required for the pit toilet area of the trailhead? And will there be a required environmental impact study done, depending on federal or the other as far as jurisdiction on that? But seems to be new construction considered for that road as far as asphalt or how they're going to relate to that. And then the concern for me is I just didn't want anything too much up by the tanks because of vulnerability to graffiti or different concerns. But I've been told the area's been utilized so much and appreciated by so many that this trailhead is very welcome by so many. And the location of the parking will keep them parkability for the residents of the Wellington area at hand. I'm hoping that they all have had a chance to make some comments if they have them, because this is the opportunity to do that. So I'd like to encourage everyone that's listening, if you're in Wellington, look into it, see what they've got cooking, and as soon as it comes to a design, then we'll have another review. So this is just to get the funding or such in the right direction. Is that?
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
That's correct. There's no design in this part, right? We will come back for all those other questions. Is there any other public comment? Okay, bring it back for a motion. Who would like to do that? Ms. Schutte.
I move to approve the submission of the FLAP grant application as presented.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Whoever designs it, if it comes out as good as the one on Kings Canyon, we will be way ahead. That was a beautiful project. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 6A. These are now moving to our non-action items. Mr. Martinovich, your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager. First thing I wanted to report, good news here. We received a $10,000 grant from the Office of Traffic Safety for messaging related to pedestrian safety campaigns here in Carson City in coordination with our Western Nevada Safe Routes to School program. So Scott Bohemier, our Western Nevada Safe Routes to School coordinator, will be looking at partnering with a public outreach agency to get some public messaging out there related to pedestrian safety, vulnerable user safety, in coordination with the Office of Traffic Safety. So big win there, and appreciate the effort and the vote of confidence from the Office of Traffic Safety. We're also working on a couple of agreements with NDOT for LPA items, so it's probably more of a future agenda item topic, but looking forward to those as well going forward, and so look forward to those coming to the board. The last thing I wanted to report on was the results of our FTA triennial review. That was conducted earlier this couple of weeks ago, mid-June. We had 2 findings, down from 7 the previous review. The 2 findings, the first one, you'll get more of these through the process in the CAMPO board, but the first one was related to procurement clauses, and so we're addressing that going forward. There were a couple of clauses, one of which was relatively new, an executive order issued as a result of purchasing telecommunications equipment from China. That's a relatively new one that we didn't have incorporated that we now need to incorporate, and that was part of the attachment, the Jack one. The second finding had to do with vehicle maintenance. We, in our vehicle maintenance plan, report that we will maintain our vehicles' preventative maintenance every 4,000 miles. We average generally around 4,800, 5,000, which is outside of the FTA's window. Their recommendation was to review our policy and review the warranty and manufacturer best practices and potentially just move the performance from 4,000 miles to 5,000 miles or 6,000 miles, in which case we wouldn't have that finding in the future. So relatively easy, I think. I was very pleased to hear that. Definitely more to report on. There'll be some other amendments and changes coming to this board as well as to the CAMPO board with various revisions and recommendations that they've made to avoid, future things as well as correct these. So wanted to report on that and provide that information to the RTC. That concludes my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll we'll move to agenda item 6B, which is our street operations report. Mr. Martinovich?
Street operations report, this is for May of 2024. We'll have one more in June, closing out our fiscal year of 2024. There's nothing specific I wanted to highlight unless somebody else wanted to ask something, but there's nothing specific I wanted to note.
I just really, once again, because it's new in the report, and if there's new public or anyone, I really like the fuel tax report that's added. I think it clearly demonstrates and shows, especially when they can see how consistent the gallonage is across from year to year to year. You know, it's just a great report, and thank you for adding that and just bringing it to people's attention.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Anybody else has anything? Okay. How about, does anybody have anything on agenda item 6C? Any other comments or reports or anything? Miss Maloney?
I had a question. I was over at North Carson and Nye the other day, and it seemed like there was a new little sign for pedestrians. Is that right? And if so, I just wanted to, I guess, give thanks to staff for taking action after that horrible injury, crash, and fatality that happened. It was good to see that little sign out. So good work getting that out so quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Schutte?
Yes, thank you. So today, a person reached out and was wondering about possible road funding and the ballot initiatives. And he was suggesting that the city give another presentation about how the funding, if the two ballot initiatives were to pass, or if one passed, the other didn't, whatever different scenarios, of how the funding would be used, how it can be used, what the perimeters of the money, how it can be spent, be brought up again and readdressed to the public so that they really know what they're voting on and what they aren't voting on. And so I thought that was an excellent idea. Another concern, or not a concern, but wondering if the funding comes through, is the city staffed to manage the projects that they would then be able to finance? And so I said I would share that.
Thank you. I think we plan to bring a lot of that forward at the August meeting.
Okay. Anybody else? Just plan for a long meeting on the 14th? Do we have long on Campo too, or just really the presentation for future agenda? Just trying to give us a feel. Is this, we need coats and food and, we're going to be here a while?
We'll take a look at the agenda and see if there's things we can adjust, and we'll take a look and we can coordinate with the chair and vice chair if needed.
Thank you.
August 14th is also the annual Tahoe Summit.
I saw that too.
And it could be a long day.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide. I saw that too. I was like, uh-oh. Okay. Do I have any final public comment? Denny? On future agenda for this? For the Board of Supervisors? Nope, you can't do that. Yeah, you can go, yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Denny French, Carson City. I just want to thank everybody that's considering my concerns about the shelters, and especially got a chance to meet a gentleman that's very involved. And I can't find his name. It's terribly embarrassing, but that's good to know. And I really do want to encourage us to think ahead as far as bus stop turnouts. I know that's something I brought up, but I'd like to just put that in. And I also, that a lot of times when I'm having trouble during the winter, it's been advised, and I've been told on several occasions that the ADA is pretty much set in concrete in this case, and can't be necessarily changed without a federal change in legislation. So what I've suggested, and it was seconded or at least considered, is that the drainage areas around are in our purview, are things that can be set. And those things and the level of and I have the deal, but it doesn't say, but as the transition of the ramp into the street, those street levels are sometimes just needing to be corrected. And then that would make that ramp much more accessible for one thing. But the drainage things, even if they're called a French drain or something that would mitigate or change the directions of the water coming into those areas that pool, I'd really like that considered in our future considerations. Drainage. Also, if we have to, street clean at some of the more vulnerable and corners and stoplights and such that get people to buses, especially be cleared somehow. Shovel, get a vehicle out there. I know I see a little vehicle that buzzes around and takes care of the flowers that are up now, and they're beautiful, and I appreciate that, but something to keep some of those areas clear, because they really are a challenge. And while we're hot, the asphalt's getting hotter, and please remember to take care. I had a little bit of I think a heat stroke, or not a stroke, but a heat exhaustion type situation just last week, and it's not pleasant. So if I diagnosed it right, it was because I wasn't being careful. But the main thing is asphalt. Let's leave it out of our vocabulary. I don't want to see any more of it. We're getting hotter and hotter, and those areas are just going to get worse. And I don't think everybody wants to put their animals in a wagon or have to have their children's souls checked when they get back to see if they have melted or not. My thing is, please consider that in our plans. Thank you.
Do I have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for a good meeting. Good job.